What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today is the day. The new project gets delivered today. At least as of a few hours ago, I spoke with the transport driver and he was just a few hours out. So I'm starting this episode early in anticipation that by the end of today, I've got my eyes on this new car for the first time. I purchased this car on the West Coast, and so I haven't had a chance to even see it in person yet. And originally I thought about driving it cross country from California to here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which, as most of you guys know, is something that I do almost once a year now. It seems like I've either purchased a car in California or sold one to someone in California and have made the road trips back and forth, and then doing Governor's Club or Ludwig's Garage pop-up meets along the way to hang out with you guys and sell some merchandise. This time, the clock was ticking down to Alpine Volksfair, which was kind of like the deadline I was looking at for this car, at least to have it here, to build air suspension for it, and get everything sorted out in time for getting to Helen, Georgia in mid-May. So as logistics were kind of taking forever to put together, as far as the cross-country trip goes, I decided to just call it quits on that part of the potential project and booked a transport for the car right after the boom of fuel. So luckily I was able to get a transport that didn't cost too much. I still feel like it was a reasonable deal to get a car transported basically across America. So I am super excited that today's finally the day. I bought this car almost 2 months ago, so it feels like it's been an eternity, especially when you purchase something sight unseen and you haven't had a chance to even see it or drive it in person. So aside from the excitement of the car showing up by the end of today, hopefully more goods have showed up for this project today as well. So today's been a huge day. I mentioned in the last episode that Bag Riders was coming on board to be a part of this project again, which I'm super grateful for. Big thanks to those guys for being a part of this project as well. Everything I need, for the most part, is now in for building the air suspension for this car. I also mentioned in the last episode that this car does not have a bolt-in air suspension application, which kind of stays in theme with everything else that I've got. Basically have to build stuff in one way or another to get air suspension fitted to the car. So within reason, I've got basically everything I'm gonna need here as far as management, the bags themselves, and some hardware. First order of business, other than just going for a quick drive in it, hopefully, is to get it in here, get it up and get the wheels off, and take some final measurements on wheels. Been working with my friends at Wheel Price on that Wheel Classifieds app, trying to find the right set of wheels for this car, which is tough to do when time is of the essence, especially when you're looking for used wheels. You don't know what's out there, what's available, what you can get in time, and et cetera, et cetera. I also want to show you guys these real quick. My girlfriend and I have made friends with the people at Mid-Mod Collective, which is a mid-century modern store up in Knoxville, Tennessee. They refurbish old mid-century modern furniture and house furnishings and resell them. They're quite popular. They have acquired a set of these 1960s Brown Jordan low-rise aluminum beach chairs. Kayla thought they would fit perfectly, not only with the aesthetic of the old cars and the fact that they're period correct. I met up with Blake and Shannon from Mid-Mod Collective, and Kayla kind of surprised me with these. They had kind of been talking about that Blake had these, that he had them for a while, and that he thought that these would fit perfectly with the Corvair and the 700. They're actually super comfortable as well. They don't look it at first glance, but these like rubber vinyl composite like straps are really super comfortable. The angle of the backrest is quite nice. And the height of them too is like easy on your knees. So these were a really cool addition to just having some display pieces at shows and display pieces that we can actually use. Yeah, so these are really cool. Brown Jordans. 1960s era Brown Jordans.
Are you excited?
Yes, and tired. All right, guys, this is it. This is an early model W108 1968 Mercedes 250 SE. This particular car is pretty special simply for the fact that it's a California car, which for someone from the Northeast in New Hampshire is an incredible find because these cars just, anything from the 60s had lots of rust issues in the Northeast, especially if they were ever driven in the winter. So this car was kept in California its entire life, and it spent a lot of its time inside a garage too, which is incredible. So the car stayed incredibly dry. This car is basically a one-owner car. The old couple that I bought this car off of bought it off of their best friend to this day, who bought it brand new in 1968. And they bought it off of him in the early 70s. So the original owner really owned the car for a few years before they bought it, and then owned it for over 40 years. It's all original. It's never been tampered with. It's got 34,000 original miles on it. The interior is in incredible condition. Because they kept this thing inside most of its life, it didn't get brutally destroyed by the sun. There's no cracks in the dash. There's no tears in the seats. These rubber thresholds down along the rockers always dried out, so this one has chipped apart pretty badly. I'm going to take a look to see if I can find those. Also, when I got the car, my OCD was going absolutely wild because the rear badge was clocked, so it was completely upside down at 180 degrees. So when I took this off, it was clear that this had been in its wrong position for years. But I cleaned it up and cleaned up the actual badge itself too while I had it off, and put it back on in its appropriate indexing. And that helped significantly because that thing looked pretty bad. Clocked the wrong way, so it looked like a Y. Many of you who know me well know that I've had a handful of these cars. It all started with my 1969 W108. That was also a 6-cylinder car. It was a 280. It had twin Zenith carburetors, and it was a column automatic shift car. It was an early model W108 like this one. It's a non-headrest car, no defroster lines in the rear window, very early model. Then I had my 1960 Fintail. That was a Hydrac 4-speed manual on the column car. That was a pretty special car. That was the first car I ever bagged, actually. That was back in 2012. I'd actually then found an identical 1960 Fintail with a hydraulic foot clutch 4-speed manual on the column that I bought simply to put the hydraulic foot clutch system in the car because the Hydrac system acted like an auto stick, and the technology for the 60s was so far advanced and they didn't make any replacement parts for it. So I kept everything in boxes, and when I sold the car, all of the original Hydrac drivetrain components went with it. After I sold that car, I ended up with a 1972 W109, which is basically the same platform, but it was an SEL, so it was a long wheelbase variant. It had a longer rear door, longer wheelbase, but that was a 4.5 V8 car. And that was a North American market only car. So Europe didn't get the 4.5 V8. And oddly enough, that car ended up in Europe. My buddy Dean Flowers in Wales owns that car now and is continuing on its slow restoration. He's redone all the interior. He's done aftermarket air suspension now. That car was an air suspension car from the factory. These cars have all held a special place in my heart, and I've just fallen in love with the vintage Mercedes brand, the body styling, the overall motorsports heritage. But automotive styling from Mercedes has always been my favorite. The 300 SL Gullwing is my favorite car, period, like dream car. And I know that's kind of hard to list when you're a car guy. A car guy like me who likes all sorts of different things, it's hard to name your favorite car. If I'm being particular, it's the 1955 300 SLR, which Mercedes only made 2 of. Speaking of Mercedes heritage, the really cool thing about this car, or another really cool thing about this car, is that it's a fuel-injected car. And Mercedes is one of the pioneers of fuel injection. They were doing fuel-injected diesels in the late 30s, and I'm pretty sure the 300 SL in 54 was one of the first fuel-injected gasoline engine cars in the world. And so Mercedes kind of pioneered that. So it's kind of crazy to think that this car is almost 15 years older than the 54 300 SL and has fuel injection, but it still feels really early to me because most of the 60s Mercedes I've had were carbureted cars. I mean, the Dodge Diplomat's a carbureted car, and that's an 87. So it's really cool that this is a fuel injected car, but it's also a power window car, which again is real early. My father had a 64 Oldsmobile 442, which was a first year 442. And that had power windows. And I remember thinking, years ago that was so early for power windows. And to be honest, when I bought this car, I bought it sight unseen. I had no idea that it was a power window car until I took delivery of it last night. And I've not tried the rear windows yet, but the two front ones do work. I did explain it on the Patreon, but I did get this car from a customer of my friend Sutton's out at Morris Motors in Northern California. He deals with a lot of vintage Mercedes. That's where my E24 CSI 6 Series went and is currently on ice. I'm hoping to dive into that project with him later on this year. But in the meantime, when I sold the Century, I had to let him know that I was in the market for something else. And a few days later, he called me with this car. The elderly couple that owned it were ready to sell it. I was really thinking about driving it cross country just to kind of have that cool trip under my belt with this car. And Sutton and his techs went through this car as if I was going to drive it cross country. So thankfully, it's come to me pretty well sorted out. Stuff that I could have done here, but kind of didn't have the time to. All right, guys, we're going for the first drive. Last night was about a mile back to my house from the transporter, but now I'm gonna go up Signal Mountain right here in Chattanooga and go for a windy drive up the mountains. I did drive it pretty hard up the mountain, and it's shifting high, but I feel like all the other ones I've had that were automatics did the same thing. It's a beautiful day out. It's running good temp. Oil pressure's good. Put some fuel in it. Odometer does work, so I'm showing 34,700 miles on it now, and that is rolling as I'm driving. Boy, I missed having one of these cars. Car drove really well. All the gauges were cooperating. Everything looked like it was performing as it should. The exhaust tone is great, but I did notice when I got under the car last night, the rear hanger is held up by none other than a bungee cord. So I don't know whose brilliant idea that was, but that has to be addressed and hung up quite a bit. As you can see, it hangs down pretty low, and that should be tucked way up tighter. My father's specialty at his shop, his whole life has been custom exhaust work. So although I'm not like a master pipe bender or anything like that, my pet peeve is seeing like dual exhaust when they aren't level with each other, or a drooping exhaust or a hanger like that. So that's going to get addressed. My OCD is going to run me absolutely ragged over stuff like that. So excited about this project. Time is of the essence. I'm going to get right into this project, going to get it up in the air, get suspension out of it. Next episode, we'll be unboxing all of the air suspension components and everything that Bag Riders has supplied me with, and then everything that I'm going to have to make from there as well. And as I mentioned, Alpine Volks Fair in Helen, Georgia is almost only 2 weeks away as I'm recording this. Thank you guys so much for watching and for all of your continued support. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm really trying to make a good go of this and keep new and exciting content coming through. I know some of them are filler episodes or shop update episodes, but just trying to get into the rhythm and muscle memory of documenting all of this stuff as best I can. Well, that's it for this episode. I will see you guys in the next one with the 68 Mercedes very shortly.